My friend believes in the Great Replacement without realizing. How do I convince him out of it? That is an unfortunate reality for many people. The best thing to ask people when they believe in the Great Replacement is why they believe people are being replaced and who they're being replaced with and what that replacement looks like. And they'll often say white people are being replaced. That's the entire point of this, right? Legacy Americans is what Tucker Carlson says, but they'll usually say it's white people at the underlying, like the ultimate people that are being replaced are the white people. There is no such thing as white people. I'm white. My skin is white. There's the paleness of your skin that makes you white, which is like what we see and what we think of when we think of white people. But the real white people concept is a political one that was deliberately crafted to justify racial subjugation to black people. It started all the way back with the one drop rule in an effort to make sure that there was a differentiating factor between the people that were being subjugated, between the people that were forced into slavery, because if you recognize that the people that you were enslaving were real human beings, then all of a sudden that gets into tricky moral territory for a lot of people who are going to say, that's not a good look, sweaty. You're kind of enslaving human beings. That's where whiteness comes from. Now, and I'm not talking about whiteness like I'm white, my pale skin. I'm talking about whiteness as a dominant political faction. When people talk about white, there's two different kinds of white. What I'm specifically talking about is whiteness as a political tool, as a political concept. It is one way to conceptualize power. And that's precisely why that in-group, because whiteness is only defined by what it's not. Whiteness is only defined by its proximity to blackness. Whiteness is only defined by capturing power and being the dominant in-group in this circumstance. When people say white culture, that's precisely what they're talking about. That's why there is nothing really identifiable about white culture in particular, other than like memes like, lol, eating mayo, putting raisins in potato salad, that sort of shit, not being able to dance. Those aren't real tangible white culture things. A part of the reason why I also mention this is because there is no such thing as like, I'm a white person and whiteness needs to be protected, because you're not a white person, you're Irish. You're not a white person, you're Polish. Every white person in this country, pretty much every white person in this country, knows exactly what their lineage is. They can trace their ethnicity back, they can trace their culture back to their great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfathers, right? Now, the opposite of that, or black culture, is not true. That's why black culture is something that is defined, that you can point to, that you can talk about with its art and with its cultural signifiers. There are tangible things you can point to when you think about black culture, because black culture is rooted within slavery. It's rooted within colonial violence. It was created out of necessity, because when black people were brought here as slaves, they were robbed of their own culture and their own language and their own background and their own names even. So they were forced to reckon with that and create their own culture in their shared intergenerational trauma and struggle. That's the main difference between black culture and white culture for the most part. That's why there's tangible things when you think about black culture, but there's nothing really that tangible when you think about white culture. This does not mean that like you aren't white, or when I say whiteness doesn't exist, you can clip that out of context and be like, oh, look at this fucking idiot, like look at what he's saying. I'm white, dumbass. But why do you think I'm not white? Why do you think the manifesto writing white supremacist shooter literally specifically had a block dedicated to how Turks are not white? Why do you think that he mentioned that specifically? Because Turkish people are Muslim, so they're not actually technically white. Do you understand? That's where whiteness becomes a political tool. Everybody deep down inside understands that, but it does not change that reality for some reason. But here, I'll give you more historical examples. Whiteness being a political concept, and one that has expanded throughout time. If you go far back in time, you will recognize that Benjamin Franklin famously considered even Germans to be not white. Here is the passage, the Swarthy Germans passage from Benjamin Franklin. I read this yesterday. Why should the Palatine Boers be suffered to swarm into our settlements and by herding together establish their language and manners to the exclusion of ours? Why should Pennsylvania, founded by the English, become a colony of aliens who will shortly be so numerous as to Germanize us instead of our Anglifying them, and will never adopt our language or customs any more than they can acquire our complexion? Which leads me to add one remark, that the number of purely white people in the world is proportionally very small. All Africa is black or tawny. Asia chiefly tawny, America, exclusive of the newcomers, wholly so. And in Europe, the Spaniards, Italians, French, Russians, and Swedes are generally of what we call swarthy complexion. Benjamin Franklin did not even consider at the time anyone who was Anglo-Saxon to be white. And throughout time, your grandfather or your grandparents were not considered white. If they were Italian immigrants, they were not considered white. If they were Greeks, they were not considered white. If they were Polish, they were not considered white. If they were Jewish, they were not considered white. All of which is now a part of the in-group. If they were Irish, they were not considered white. So, like I said, whiteness has expanded throughout time, and it now even includes in the American census data, at the very least, Hispanic people as well. And I don't mean Spanish people from Europe, but Hispanic people who are descendants of Spanish people who have mixed with the indigenous populations in Latin American countries. There is a concept such as white Hispanics in this country. Even Hispanic people, once again, for a very long time would not have been considered to be white, are now considered white. So the reason why I'm mentioning that is because that concept has expanded. But usually, under fascist leadership, because of the way fascism operates, because of the way white supremacy operates, that concept shrinks. Okay, so if you think you're in the comfort right now of living in the imperial core, being considered white, think again. That will shrink. That's why the Aryan concept that Hitler was advancing was getting smaller and smaller to define the Übermensch, a blonde, blue-eyed person, which ironically Hitler himself was not even a part of. So that's just how fascism works. That's just how fascism always has operated. There's never going to be an endpoint, a logical endpoint. It's just going to be more and more insular with like a smaller and smaller group of people within the in-group. So that's, that's something to consider, something to understand. I hope that is a little bit more helpful in your understanding of how whiteness has expanded throughout time. But ultimately,
I'm going to switch videos here. This video will be called The Fall of Europe. And so I'm going to run through the graph here that shows you that the European population had been growing until, I don't know if this started this year. I believe it would have been this year because I'm sure I looked at the Worldometer last year. And if you look at the number where it says live, there's 741,656,824. On the graph at the bottom where it says European population 1950 to 2023, at the beginning of the year, the European population was 742,272,652. They have dropped 1 million plus people from the beginning of the year to this present day. And we're watching that number. 23 is going to turn to 22. Those are registering deaths in Europe, not births. Because it's going backwards. The population, you have to have 2.1, 2.3, 2.1, 2 to 2.1, excuse me, in order to grow a population. Europe has been stagnant since the 50s. They have been under 1% or 1 or below 1. Alexa, resume. So, right up in here, they get about to that 1.1% in 1959. They were at a 1.01. Well, okay, you have to have a 2 or 2.1. Every female has to replace herself and her partner. This is definitely not happening here. As we go down this bell curve, I'm going to call it the bell curve, since people like to use that term when it comes to acuity and intelligence. The IQ means the intelligence quotient. And they try to put this number on the intelligence quotient. Well, the intelligence quotient goes with the acuity to survive the planet. The most intelligent people has the acuity to survive the planet. Okay? It's not all this fake knowledge, fake news, white genocide, replacement theory. This is a natural occurrence. It's called natural selection. When you're naturally selected, go and Google that. Go and Google that. Because this is something that's very serious. While you're waving the Trump flag, you're waving that you're Republican. Oh, you're a white supremacist. Well, whiteness, that phony social construct that you're looking for, white nationalism that you'll never get because you're not white, you're Europeans, respectively. I say it humbly. And look what's going on. That number is declining. You can see it declining here. Look, where that little dip is beyond that. Does that say minus? Minus.
This society, I was conditioned by it. I think internally in my psyche, I've grounded and rooted those attitudes, and I see it in me all the time.
I don't like being a white man, and that's where I still am and working on it, because I know what I've done, what people like me have done.
Part of being white is just not in any way acknowledging what it means to be white.
I have a white skin, and that with that white skin comes along a whole mess of privileges that I have, and I don't ask for them, they just are there.
You have started to break the code of silence a little bit when you start talking about white people and you start talking about this stuff, and you find yourself suddenly all alone.
History, as I understand it, was really, people coming to America as a way of searching for a better life and escaping poverty. And it has often seemed to me that also meant escaping their roots, where they came from, that there was a sort of a desire to separate from that and to become something different.
That I have Scotch-Irish ancestry with a little bit of German. I'm European, and I came over 250 years ago.
My ancestors are from England and Germany.
My ancestors are German and Russian and Scottish.
In my father's side, it was Irish, and my mother's side, it was probably English, but I don't know a lot about her side.
I'm French Indian. I guess you'd say I got a little Cajun in me.
Ireland. Did you identify as Irish?
No, not really. I identify as an American.
British, Scotch-Irish. Scotch, that's where my ancestors are from, supposedly, but hasn't had any impact on me. Doesn't mean anything.
I think pilgrims. When I think of where did I come from, I think pilgrims, but no. But I'm sure somewhere down the line I am.
Because they were Irish, there was a lot of oppression, because they immigrated over from Ireland. So I thought a lot about what that was like for them as Irish people, but I never thought about what it was like for them and when they became white.
Well, you can only be something if there's something else to negate it, so I guess we became white. I guess we're white because there's a bunch of other races to set us off.
So how did English people and German people get turned into white people?
Came to America.
By assimilation, by living, by living in the U.S. It's just the smorgasbord,
I have no idea. I honestly have no idea.
Do you know how they got turned into British and Scotch people? How those people got turned into white people?
No.
Have you ever thought about that?
I'm not a history buff. I think culture did that. Over time, like certain words that we use in our language are not our words, they're other nations. Other words that come from other languages.
Yeah. How did the Irish get turned into white people?
That's a good question.
I think a lot of it was early assimilation in the United States, a lot of European ethnics coming over, assimilating for a variety of reasons. Primary one being a desire to elevate their socioeconomic status. So to get jobs, to find places to live, a lot of the Europeans altered their last names to sound more mainstream. A lot of them changed the clothing that they wore, the foods they ate. So there was this, some might call it assimilation. I think of it more as Anglo-conformity, conforming to this kind of dominant white culture.
But the reality is that those persons who are white and who are considered white and treated as such in this society, by virtue of being white and treated that way, have had to give up who they really were. If they were Russian American, my father's side of the family, grandfather's side, great-grandfather came here from Russia in 1910. He had to give up what it meant to be a Jew, a Russian Jew from Eastern Europe, to become an American, which really meant to become white. The Irish had to do the same thing.
Barracuda Email Protection is the industry's most comprehensive email protection platform. We use multiple layers of protection.
Has expanded throughout time, but ultimately it's not a real concept. It's just power. Just a group of people at least have some level of proximity to power. Now, of course, there are things that are more significant than whiteness when defining power, because we live in a capitalist organization of the economy. What does that mean? Say, Hassan, I'm white. Theo Vaughn, for example, has a very funny bit about this. He'll say, actually, you know what? I'm going to show you that bit really quickly to describe to you that class sometimes, or in most circumstances actually, completely overrule or supersede your race, okay?
City in my neighborhood, diversity is always people's talking about it. And we didn't have it. My neighborhood was poor black, poor white. That was our neighborhood, So I didn't feel any white privilege. I know some people had it, man, I knew some motherfuckers with sweaters. But I was 2 tank tops in the winter, okay? And I just didn't feel it, I wish I'd had some white privilege, dude. Sign me up. But I didn't have it, man. It was just poor black kids, poor white kids, man. And my poor black friends would always be like, man, look what you did to us. And I'm like, dude, do you think I would do all that shit to y'all and then move right next door, bro? Now, we gonna split this plum or not, dog?
So that's a perfect example, as a humorous example of literally fucking describing the fact that class will supersede race in a lot of circumstances. That's why, especially now in the United States of America, obviously Oprah is a billionaire. She's a black woman and a billionaire, and is significantly more fortunate than obviously a white homeless person, right? Class is more important than race in that situation. I'm not saying that this is a concept that you need to understand about intersectionality, okay? This is where you lose the libs. I don't care. because it's really fucking annoying. Now, this is also, even if you look at the most liberal of historians, specifically black historians like Ta-Nehisi Coates, the concept of blackness has always been weaponized to destroy class solidarity, specifically in the Reconstruction era, in the aftermath of the abolition of slavery in the United States of America. Because poor white people that were just as abused, obviously not as abused, but poor white people that were also exploited by rich white people, for the most part, were made to think that at least they were not black and therefore they were in a better position than someone else. It's always better to be able to punch down to someone, because ultimately you're like, hey, I know I'm getting fucked over by my boss here, I'm losing my fingers or whatever, but ultimately at least I'm not a black person, right? That is the way that our rulers, our oligarchs, have historically been able to divide us and stop class solidarity from ever being achieved in any meaningful capacity. There's also less resistance when you punch down, and it makes you feel better, right? This is how it works. Now that we mentioned that as well, because I want you to understand that, like, the deliberate purpose of why certain people weaponize this kind of division amongst the working class. Let's talk about let's further talk about the Great Replacement theory that the Republican Party routinely weaponizes. But whiteness is simply just a social construct in the way that we understand it as a
on Twitter at this time, and according to Daniel, he says that the African American, no, he didn't say that. Let me take that back. He said that whites are the majority. And the point of this video here is I'm going to break down the European population, just to give you an example. Not all of them, but some that you know very well that are claiming that they're white people. Let's look at their real populations compared to the real population that they give you for African Americans and others, without breaking themselves down into their set groups to lie and use white identity to create a false white majority. And when you break it down, you will see that white people don't exist, that they've been using white identity and assigning racially, with racism, black identity to Africans to give themselves some relevance. So that's what they did. So I'm going to prove it that they're not a majority and why they're not. I'm going to hook this up to a speaker. German American population. I'm not going to read the top stuff. I'm specifically interested in what it says about populations. And so I have to go here. I'm going to move my screen over here. And we can see that there are 43,100,000 German Americans in the U.S. population in 2017. That is at 13.20% of the total U.S. population is what they're comprised of. So that's the largest group of Europeans that call themselves white people. So we've noted them, and we will go through some more. The second group I'm going to go through is the British Americans. Just so I can show you what this breakdown of the percentages. Now, Europeans like to use percentages until it comes to their demographics. Then we can find that there is some misinformation that's lingering out there, and the statistics that they want you to think of it as one way when in actuality it wouldn't be a true representation. I'm giving you the true representations now. So we're going to break the Europeans down, and you could also do this. You'll just have to go and call them what they are: British Americans, German Americans, Sweden Americans, and it will get the numbers from that. Wait for this to load. Okay, there goes our British American. British also consists of the United Kingdom. So we're also counting the people from the UK and how many of them are in the United States demographics. So when they speak as a people, they must speak as their group and the demographics of the United States. To conglomerate all Europeans under a code of white, it is cheating. And so we're going to come back, and now, like I said, we're only interested in the population. And as you can see, that according to this, the total population or self-identified as Britons are 1,881,234 in 2017. They are 0.6% of the U.S. population. 0.6% of the total U.S. population. So you see how this is looking? Other estimates that they are, from other estimates, that's their fake white estimate, you see. They're not going to say what that other is. But let me click on that, because as I've learned to use Wikipedia, and they say that about Ancestry.com UK, this information was retrieved on March 17th of 2015. So, okay, so we've got them down as 0.6% of the population, and the Germans were 13.25% of the population. So now I'm going to go here and go back, and I will go and look at, we looked at the Germans, and we looked at the Brits. So let's go to the French. Let's see how many French Americans are here in the United States. They have to represent their old demographics, just like we're African Americans. We represent the country that we come from, and they can't go by the label of European because they have all those separate countries, and they do break down the Africans that migrate here. But because of the American history, the African Americans are umbrellaed under a conglomeration because they messed up our histories when they brought us from brought our ancestors from Africa and enslaved them. So they have to count us as one, but they can't count themselves as one because they came into the United States post-slavery. The majority of them that they're calling is white majority. And this has all been a game that the Europeans have played, and they've gotten to the end game. So we're looking at the total French population is 10,329,465. They are 3% of the U.S. population. 8,028,623 are only French. The other part are the 2,182,000 are French Canadian. So the demographics are 3%. Okay. So we're looking at population majorities and minorities. So we just did the French Americans. I want to go do the Italian Americans. In fact, I'm going to do Russian American. I want to do them because they're in our current news. So let's look at the Russian American population in the United States. Russian Americans here. I had promised that I was going to break them down by demographic, who they are, where they sit in the United States population. It's not a majority, because you cannot come up with the racial construct and call yourself hashtag white people that we're the majority, when if you break you down into who you really are. Look here. This is a very interesting population. 3,163,084 self-reported Russians. They are 1% of the U.S. total population, and 409,000 are Russian-born. Okay, what does that tell you? That they are being snuck in and hashtag being called white. These people have just as much rights as all of the rest of their fake groups of white people. This is why this got to be broke down, because we're going through a population decline. And so we're going to go now to, we did Russia, French. Let's do Italy. I'm going to do Italian American, and then I'm going to do Mexican and African American. And it's going to be some shocking information that comes out from here. I've written it down. We can also go back and look at it yourself and see that these are the demographics for America. See, that didn't come out right. Total population in the United States, and that is 17,222,412, and they are 5.4% of the U.S. population. If you look at it today in 2019, it has fallen because I can say that even the African American population that was 14.5%. According to them, they were saying that it was 13.5%. So if we say that it was 13.5%, let's go with their number. The African American population in America is 100,000, and that is the largest group of Europeans in the country. The African Americans are at 45,789,188. They are 14% of the total U.S. population. That puts them number one in the population. Right now, African Americans are the majority group in the United States. Per these particular demographics, I don't think they're going to get past this one and the one with Germany, because I've been studying this long enough to know which is the largest European demographic in the United States. African Americans are 14%, 14.1%. So right now they're fighting with the Mexicans. And let's look at the Mexican American population in America. Population. We know it's going to fall on that side of the screen. They actually did kind of give that data there, but I don't want to read through all the data. We're looking at the population. Population for Mexican Americans are 36,668,018. They are 11.3% of the total U.S. population as of 2017. So that puts African Americans rank one in the majority of the population of the United States. Germany ranked 2 in the total population of the United States. None of the other populations supersede any of those 3 groups. I'm going to go back to German American. I just showed you the Mexican and the African American. So we're going to go back through the German. To the Mexican American, or German American, excuse me, we're waiting. Excuse me, we're waiting. Let me pop up my synaptic tool here. So here we are again looking at that number for the German population, German American, and German Canadian populations of the total population, 43,100,000. They are 13.20% of the U.S. population, and they rank second. Mexico was 11.2% of the population.
To become an American, which really meant to become white. The Irish had to do the same thing. The Italians had to do the same thing. The Greeks had to do the same thing. All these European ethnics who were not white Anglo-Saxon Protestants had to give up their actual identities for the sake of whiteness.
I really didn't think about being white, I'd say, growing up, because mainly, I think because I was part of the majority and I maybe wasn't forced to think about it.
I don't think it means anything. It's just, some people might think it means better, but to me it doesn't mean anything but just the color of my skin, really.
How often do you think about being white?
Not very often. I really don't think about it a lot at all.
Hardly ever. It's just me.
Racially, do you see yourself as a white person?
No, I see myself as a person.
So do you ever think about being a white person?
No.
Probably not very often.
Not really. Sometimes I got a lot of black friends. Sometimes we make jokes about it and everything, but
not really. It doesn't matter to me whether I'm white, pink, or purple, or black. I don't care.
Depends on the social situation. Sometimes I'll be the only white person in the room when it's reversed, when the tables are sort of flipped.
How do you identify racially? Do you see yourself as a white man?
I think that everybody is equal in the eyes of the Lord.
So you don't see yourself as a white person?
Not as much as most people. I think when it's all said and done, we're equal, and definitely inside and outside.
But I don't know if I ever considered myself white or thought about it. At one point I'm sure I did, but I don't really have any recollection of when it was, which I think is a total reflection of whiteness, of never having to sort of contemplate why people treat you the way they do.
To be white means to be a member of a dominant racial group in a society that I'd consider white supremacist. And to be white in a white supremacist society, not just a racist society, because that's almost too generic, to be white in a white supremacist society is to be able to have the luxury of oblivion, to be oblivious to the injustices, to be oblivious to racial privilege, to be oblivious, frankly, to one's own identity. So it is, in a sense, to be invisible to oneself.
Well, I think to be white in this culture means to deny the reality of racism. And it means to deny the privilege that we have as whites. Most people who are whites don't want to accept that they are privileged because they are.
People don't want to talk about being white because they know that at a deep level, even though they haven't some of them may not have ever talked about it with anybody or ever expressed it, they do know that they get a benefit from being white.
Life moves fast, but Work Money is here to help with extra support, money-saving hacks, and budget tips.
Whiteness is simply just a social construct in the way that we understand it as a political tool. That's precisely why when you think about white people, there were videos that we watched, remember? Ask a white person, like, what does whiteness mean to you? People had a really hard time coming up with anything, and it certainly turned into what whiteness wasn't. Whiteness is not something that is easily definable, and also the whiteness in and of itself is impossible to defend outside of actual acts of ethnic cleansing, okay? Systemic ethnic cleansing is the only way that you can defend whiteness, because whiteness is purity. One drop of black blood turns you into a non-white person. That's where the one drop rule comes from historically, right? That's precisely why Barack Obama, who is half white, is not considered to be yet another white president, but instead the first black president. Half white, but no one thinks of him like that, unless you're Mitch McConnell trying to dunk on him and say that his Obama's ancestors owned slaves, which is pretty gross, but gonna do. But that's it. That's the entire purpose of blackness, and everyone understands it, and that's the entire purpose of whiteness as well. Everyone kind of understands the other side of this, but it feels like something that is just the norm, and that is because white supremacist attitudes are the norm. They are the norm. They are a part of the foundation of this country. That's why all of our founding fathers owned slaves and maintained that, regardless of how you are educated in your schools. It's a complete fucking fabrication, no lie. It's impossible to shake off, because any kind of push that you make to adequately describe America's racial subjugation of black people, brown people, indigenous people, is met with a fuckload of resistance. They call it CRT, they call it whatever the fuck, and they freak the fuck out on you and say this is communism. Now, the other thing that I want to mention when I'm talking about Tucker Carlson, for example, and his attitude and the Great Replacement theory, and how similar that is to how identical that is to what the shooter wrote about in his manifesto. I need you to understand that this doesn't mean that Tucker Carlson is single-handedly responsible for it. Now, why? Culture in and of itself is not going to be the only way to activate people into, engaging in acts of violence. That's why there aren't exactly a lot of examples of this on the leftist side, where people aren't turning into fucking communists because they watched one movie. It is significantly harder to change people's attitudes against the system, against the pre-existing social hierarchy, against the dogmas that they have been socially conditioned into believing through art and through culture than it is to lean into pre-existing attitudes. And that's precisely why, for example, Birth of a Nation, which was a movie even played in the White House, reignited the Klan. That is a calculable impact that a movie had. But if it was the opposite, if it was a movie about not being racist or some shit, it would not have had that same kind of impact, because the structures in the United States of America and the foundations of the United States of America are not founded on anti-racist principles. They are founded on white supremacist principles, the preservation of slavery, the subjugation of humans. So just remember that. When I talk about culture, it's not individually culture. I'm not a liberal who says we need to sanitize our movies, we need to sanitize our language, and that's the only way to combat white supremacy. That is not a way to combat white supremacy.
To become an American, which really meant to become white. The Irish had to do the same thing. The Italians had to do the same thing. The Greeks had to do the same thing. All these European ethnics who were not white Anglo-Saxon Protestants had to give up their actual identities for the sake of whiteness.
I really didn't think about being white, I'd say, growing up, because mainly I think because I was part of the majority and I maybe wasn't forced to think about it.
I don't think it means anything. It's just, some people might think it means better, but to me it doesn't mean anything but just the color of my skin, really.
How often do you think about being white?
Not very often. I really don't think about it a lot at all.
Hardly ever. It's just me.
Racially, do you see yourself as a white person?
No, I see myself as a person.
So do you ever think about being a white person?
No.
Probably not very often.
Not really. Sometimes I got a lot of black friends. Sometimes we make jokes about it and everything, but
Not really. It doesn't matter to me whether I'm white, pink, or purple, or black. I don't care.
Depends on the social situation. Sometimes I'll be the only white person in the room when it's reversed, when the tables are sort of flipped.
How do you identify racially? Do you see yourself as a white man?
I think that everybody is equally as the Lord.
So you don't see yourself as a white person?
Not as much as most people. I think when it's all said and done, we're equal, and definitely inside and outside.
But I don't know if I ever considered myself white or thought about it. At one point, I'm sure I did, but I don't really have any recollection of when it was, which I think is a total reflection of whiteness, of never having to sort of contemplate why people treat you the way they do.
To be white means to be a member of a dominant racial group in a society that I'd consider white supremacist. And to be white in a white supremacist society, not just a racist society, because that's almost too generic. To be white in a white supremacist society is to be able to have the luxury of oblivion, to be oblivious to the injustices, to be oblivious to racial privilege, to be oblivious, frankly, to one's own identity. So it is, in a sense, to be invisible to oneself.
Well, I think to be white in this culture means to deny the reality of racism. And it means to deny the privilege that we have as whites. Most people who are whites don't want to accept that they are privileged because they are.
People don't want to talk about being white because they know that at a deep level, even though they haven't some of them may not have ever talked about it with anybody or ever expressed it, they do know that they get a benefit from being white.
If you're white in this country, there's certain advantages that come your way, and it doesn't really matter whether you want to or not, or whether you're in touch with it or not.
No, I know there are privileges that I enjoy simply because I'm white.
Every minute of my life, I'm aware of my white privilege, of the fact that I have a white skin, and that with that white skin comes along a whole mess of privileges that I have, and I don't ask for them, they just are there.
There are things that come to me, that belong to me, that I'm given and that I expect just because I'm white, that I never wonder about, ask about, discuss. And that's the power of it, is that the privilege of expecting that I'm going to go to good schools and that I'm going to have choices no matter what, that there will always be a choice that will be probably pretty reasonable, that will work out pretty well for me.
To me, it's about privilege. A lot of people get to walk around thinking that we live in a meritocracy and thinking that their own hard work is the only thing that's responsible for their achievements. I think that it means, and I think that it shapes everything.
White privilege is probably the freedom to move through the world fearlessly in a way that black people cannot move through the world. That you can take advantage of opportunities with much less fear, and an assumption that you'll be treated equally with all other white people.
Part of it is not having to even think about it. And so in a way, it's sort of like the privilege of having that space in your mind free to think about other things and be concerned about other things. So it's not even having to be
to think about race is part of the privilege. White privilege is being able to walk into a department store and not be followed by the detective. A friend of mine who's Asian American, she was very unfairly treated at a department store. She was at a cosmetics counter, and she had bought something and it came with a free gift. So the woman at the counter put the free gift in the bag, and my friend didn't know that the free gift had already been put in the bag, so she had grabbed the one on the counter and put it in the bag unknowingly. Just as the sweetest woman, wouldn't hurt a fly. And they called the cops on her, and she was taken to jail and arrested. I put myself in the same position that she was at, and I know there's no way I would have been arrested. I know I would not have been arrested.
It's the assumption that when you go to buy a car that you're going to have the money. Or it's the assumption that when you go into a real estate office looking for a place to rent, unless you wear raggedy clothes, it's that you're going to want to go into this nice neighborhood.
You basically get to say what you want to, be any way you want to. You get privilege. You don't have to work as hard. You can slack off in jobs and still get promoted and still not have to worry about somebody coming after you. So whiteness to me is about privilege and access to information systems and people and power that you didn't earn.
I went through a time where I was poor and I had to take care of my father, and I worked with about 100 African-American men, and I was the only white male on the shop floor. And I was really horrible at this job. It was a metal grinder. I'd grind too much of it. I'd make big indentations. I was constantly messing up, and I was sure I was going to get fired. It was just a matter of time. And about 6 months into the job, the boss and a few of the managers come over. They're all white men. And I thought, this is it. This is the day I'm getting fired. And they came over and told me that they've had their eye on me and they think that I'm management material. I said, what? And they said, yeah, you stick around for a while and we think you've got potential to be a manager here.
It's all embedded in every piece of our country. It's embedded in every...
At Lemonade, we're changing insurance, starting with clearly explaining how it works. Our renter's insurance policies start from as...
Whiteness is simply just a social construct in the way that we understand it as a political tool. That's precisely why when you think about white people, there were videos that we watched, remember? Ask a white person, like, what does whiteness mean to you? People had a really hard time coming up with anything, and it certainly turned into what whiteness wasn't. Whiteness is not something that is easily definable, and also the whiteness in and of itself is impossible to defend outside of actual acts of ethnic cleansing, okay? Systemic ethnic cleansing is the only way that you can defend whiteness, because whiteness is purity. One drop of black blood turns you into a non-white person. That's where the one drop rule comes from historically, right? That's precisely why Barack Obama, who is half white, is not considered to be yet another white president, but instead the first black president. Half white, but no one thinks of him like that, unless you're Mitch McConnell trying to dunk on him and say that his Obama's ancestors owned slaves, which is pretty gross, but gonna do. But that's it. That's the entire purpose of blackness, and everyone understands it, and that's the entire purpose of whiteness as well. Everyone kind of understands the other side of this, but it feels like something that is just the norm, and that is because white supremacist attitudes are the norm. They are the norm. They are a part of the foundation of this country. That's why all of our founding fathers owned slaves and maintained that, regardless of how you are educated in your schools. It's a complete fucking fabrication and a lie. It's impossible to shake off, because any kind of push that you make to adequately describe America's racial subjugation of black people, brown people, indigenous people, is met with a fuckload of resistance. They call it CRT, they call it whatever the fuck, and they freak the fuck out on you and say this is communism. Now, the other thing that I want to mention when I'm talking about Tucker Carlson, for example, and his attitude and the Great Replacement Theory, and how similar that is to how identical that is to what the shooter wrote about in his manifesto. I need you to understand that this doesn't mean that Tucker Carlson is single-handedly responsible for it. Now, why? culture in and of itself is not going to be the only way to activate people into, engaging in acts of violence. That's why there aren't exactly a lot of examples of this on the leftist side, where people aren't turning into fucking communists because they watched one movie. It is significantly harder to change people's attitudes against the system, against the pre-existing social hierarchy, against the dogmas that they have been socially conditioned into believing through art and through culture than it is to lean into pre-existing attitudes. And that's precisely why, for example, Birth of a Nation, which was a movie even played in the White House, reignited the Klan. That is a calculable impact that a movie had. But if it was the opposite, if it was a movie about not being racist or some shit, it would not have had that same kind of impact. Because the structures in the United States of America and the foundations of the United States of America are not founded on anti-racist principles. They are founded on white supremacist principles, the preservation of slavery, the subjugation of humans. So just remember that. When I talk about culture, it's not individually culture. I'm not a liberal who says we need to sanitize our movies, we need to sanitize our language, and that's the only way to combat white supremacy. That is not a way to combat white supremacy. In many circumstances, that's actually a feckless way to combat white supremacy. It's not. It's just it's super individualized. It's hyper atomized, and it makes us feel like we have a semblance of power when we're able to impact culture because a corporation listens to us. But ultimately, you're not. You're not actually changing anything. You're just simply so powerless that you want to exert any kind of control over your own life because you recognize that you can't exert any kind of control over the structures. That is what ultimately needs to change. And the only way to change the structures is through class consciousness, instilling class consciousness, building organizations, organizing your workplace, having some kind of labor power and labor militancy in an effort to push back against your masters at your workplace, but then also even the Democratic Party to motivate them to do the right thing when they refuse to do so. This is all this is a super long and super difficult agenda that has fallen short time and time again. That's why America's unionization rates are dog shit. That's why we have no class consciousness. That's why, the 1920s are not all that different from the attitude that we have currently. Steinbeck famously said, socialism will never work in America because the working class do not see themselves as an exhausted and exploited proletariat, and yet they see themselves as temporarily embarrassed millionaires. Now, that within cryptocurrency, you can see that within every facet of our lives, but so many people on the internet think that owning their 1997 broken down Honda Civic is actually a form of owning capital, and they are simply temporarily embarrassed billionaires. That Sigma Grindset attitude, that meritocracy is a lie, or meritocracy is a reality, and that's precisely how they are one day going to make it as well. And when they make it, they want to make sure that the system is deregulated, not realizing that deregulation itself is making it impossible for them to have a semblance of upward social mobility. So just understand that it's all interconnected. Okay? It's all interconnected, and so many people personally are pushing against their best interests.
2.1 or better fertility birth of the United States. Jews as a
tittle around with this a little bit here. Move it up some. There I go, right there.
White people, when white people do not exist. So hold on here a minute. So we're going to go to the truth about Europe.
If we were to look at the pattern of fertility.
The pattern of fertility.
We would have to conclude that Europe is a dying continent.
Worldwide.
For a population to sustain itself, it must have a fertility rate of about 2.1 to 2.2. Most European countries have fertility rates now that are 1 and less than 1. So these are countries that literally cannot survive unless they will bring in or allow in hundreds and thousands more migrants than there are doing today. 10 years ago, the world...
The rationale is to do what? The same as where?
Quality of life that it had in 1995, it would have to increase its migrant intake by a factor of 17.
They have to, in order to maintain.
The European government was make the walls higher, top them with barbed wire. I'm being facetious.
Keep us out.
Okay. So I think that I caught to my point here in regarding that Europe, Americans, and worldwide Europe is going extinct because their populations are one or less than one. And you have to have a 2.1 or better fertility birth rate in order to maintain your populations. Where that little dip is beyond that, does that say minus? Minus 0.05%. You're falling below the scale here. Okay? When it was saying this in the past, 0.5, 0.6, it minus 0.5, it was ticking up, not down. Look. 2008, 0.25. They're climbing, only to come back to decline again and again and again. At 2020 and 2020, it's 0.0. That's the only thing that explained to me why this number is falling down, falling backwards. Because look, minus 0.14 in 2021. Let's look at 2022. Minus 0.2022. 22. Minus 0.22. Last year, because this year they haven't posted this yet, the population for this year. Where it's going on this year, but it's by this count when they put everything together for next year for us to look for it. Look at it. But we are watching it live as it manifests so that it's proof. It's showing you the evidence. It's not something that's just you're looking at the page or they're just telling you this. You're watching it live. The number declining. Minus 0.17%. People are dying. They're not being born. If this doesn't give you a lens to being woke, to awaken to what's going on, all of this hate-filled stuff doesn't go with it. There's no white genocide. There's no replacement. You didn't replace yourselves. No other mother's blood can replace you. We can only help you. And that's with admixing. But you don't want that either. But you don't want to have children. And children are not being born in Europe. It's so few children being born that the ones that are, people that are dying are outpacing the children being born. So we're seeing now people dying live. All added together under the white code. Let's call it a white code. Is put there to make them be able to change laws, write anything they want, and write this supreme European law, that because it is a European law, because the Europeans are doing it, and they've ganged together under this white sheeted KKK society identity, and has been using it as a power. So how do you break the power? Number one, you break them down and you never call them white again, and it becomes offensive to call you black. The U.S. Census, the Office of Management and Budget have to remove that particular stigma off of the African American community. So let's see something. Do I have that video here? Here's a video. I'm going to put it up. Good thing I played it recently.
I just wanted to show you something.
So what I'm going to show you is how vague and minuscule that they do this to you, and you're not aware of it. You're numb to it. But watch how they break us down, and because we demanded an identity, African American, they have us as African American / black. Any other ethnic group you see there will not have any color to it. And then there's going to be a big puddle of white when I just broke them down to you. So I'm explaining this particular small video before I play it, and it's not racist, and I'm not trying to be biased. I'm trying to educate you. Not just my people, but their people, because they need to find their ethnicity. How the hell do you as a people start dwindling off the planet based on you denying your motherland, your country of origin, your ethnicity, to claim white identity and say that it is no such thing as white supremacy? Okay?
They're about lying about racial categories, and that is declined to specify, and that was American Indian or Native, Alaskan Native, Asian, Black or African American, Native or Pacific Islander are white. But there's no such thing as white, because just like they broke all of those other categories down into specific groups, they are Europeans. So anybody that's falling for the white lie, that's why it's called a white lie, that's falling for all of these minorities sitting over here from Europe, coming in every day, trying to lie like they're white so that they could create white supremacy. This is why I say you cannot be white and not by default be a white supremacist. Now, I didn't say that you take that into your heart and you execute that, but you need to know that when you're choosing white identity, you're automatically signing on to a population of people that have lied about a majority population so that they could lie under whiteness, and so you automatically become a white supremacist, whether you want to or not.
To become an American, which really meant to become white. The people treat
house.
That's white people, and some of us are downright awful about it.
Because so much of the focus is on personal prejudices. That's how I think a large part of the U.S. population analyzes race matters is between different groups of people.
Well, I think it works the same way. If black people feel that white people can be racist towards them, I don't see any difference between a black person being racist towards a white person.
In high school, the high school I attended was probably 60% black, 40% white, and being white and majority black class, I was picked on and teased for that. So
sometimes you come across people that feel because of what had happened in the past that we're held responsible. I'm 30 years old. I wasn't around when that was happening.
I know what it feels like to be subjected to anger for something that I personally never did.
If we're in the wrong place sometimes, it's obvious that we're in the wrong place, we're the wrong color to be in that place, you'll hear a comment, you'll hear some things that's not so nice that you would never think that you would hear. You're a little too white to be in this neighborhood.
When I was teaching, I was not privileged because I had to interact with a lot of stereotypes about white people, and I had to deal with them on that level, but I was privileged in the sense that I got the job in the first place.
I think that one of the key things to understand about racism is, like Malcolm X said, racism is like a Cadillac. There's a new model every year, and it's racism is a dynamic social construction, so it's always changing, it's always mutating. So people that say, well, there's no racism anymore, they're referring to racism as it existed in 1950 or 1920 or 1910.
Racism permeates every aspect of our society, and it's made it, a world that we live in that's very unequal.
It isn't what you personally did or did not do. And I think that's such a hard leap for white people to make, is like, it isn't something that I personally did, but it's something I personally have to work against.
It ain't just a matter of who I am as a person or what I think or feel about other people.
I think there's a hierarchy in our country that's based very clearly on skin color and on people's perceptions of what race you're in. And white are at the top and black are at the bottom, and Asian and Native American and people of sort of light brown hue are in the middle, and Latinos are down, and then blacks are at the bottom.
Racism is not simply about how we get along on an individual level, but it has to do with who has institutional and social power.
White people have the political and social power in our society, and that is a given. And if you pick apart social and political situations, you can see that very clearly. I think it's quite obvious.
Whites get privilege and experience the advantage of being in a system that thinks white is better than folk of color, and so there's all this unearned advantage that's going on all the time.
Yeah, particularly in a society like the United States, it's hard to confront racism unless you understand how, if you're racialized as white, you benefit from racism.
Just because I am white and have these privileges, I participate in a racist system. And that doesn't make that, it's not my fault, I can't help it, I'm born to it. And, and that's what being white means.
But I do think and assume that white privilege is, in fact, the kind of racism that you can't avoid.
All I gotta do is sit down and close my eyes, and things are gonna just move forward in sort of in white interests. And there's a way in which I'm complicit. I collude. I don't say anything. I don't do anything to stop it or challenge it. And in that way, I really do think that's how racism works, and that's a way in which I'm racist. And the difference now is that I don't try and prove to anyone else or even to myself that I'm not racist. I sort of assume that, know that, and get on with doing anti-racist work as best I can.
I believe that the very depth of understanding racism is understanding that process of us becoming white, historically us becoming white, and exactly what does that mean to be white, and how much of our humanity that we've lost. Because I think that the only way that whites can truly regain our humanity that's lost to the degree at which we've bought into white is through doing anti-racism work in anything that we do.
Minus 0.05%. You've fallen 12% black. Because, see, it's unfair already that the African Americans aren't broken down into their ethnicity groups because they don't know where they come from due to the miserable thing that happened. Even though you wasn't born, you're still living under that system of white supremacy. You guys are the ones that, not you specifically, Europeans are the ones that gave us a label black so that they could be white. And then they said it's a race. That race is what I'm talking about. That 13.6 for the Germans, that 3.6 for the Scottish, and the 5.3 for the Italians are being added up, and then all up under this white social construct. And what they used it as versus the African population. So they labeled us black versus white. It's black versus white instead of Europeans versus Africans. So this is where the system begins of colorism, racism, and discrimination. That this race was a race to lie that you're the majority. That's where they got that 63% or 72% white. No, they've added all of their country numbers up together to get to that majority. Race is a competition. They changed the meaning of what race is. Of course, you can go look it up, and it's going to tell you, it's going to fit their narrative. But come on now. Come on. Race, the term, doesn't even fit what they're saying it is. Other than that, it's a competition here. We're in a race to the majority. So they called it race. The race to the majority was to conglomerate all Europeans under the label white versus the people that had been stolen from and kidnapped off their land are stranded here. Stranded, although we are part of the fabric of this very country that you're calling yours and have been here longer, and the evidence of that is in the population numbers. 14.2%. Well, you know why it can't go higher? Because now they're not doing like they're doing with, they're not doing us like they're doing themselves. When Europeans come into the country, they get added into the white number. But when Africans come into the country and they migrate and they become a citizen, they are not added to that 14.2%. They leave them as, okay, Nigeria doesn't make the percentage rate. Nigeria's population growth here looks like what we're seeing in Europe. It would be a number dropping, not increasing. Okay? Any other country, you come here, you start having babies, it doesn't, they're not going to count it with your original population. That number in your original population is dropping. And your numbers here will be much, much lower in the population as it should, because you're migrant. We're all migrants, except for the African Americans, you know. So, if you don't know history, look up European slavery, because it's not called Black history, African history. Look up European history with Africa, and then you will see that slavery is European history. It's not Black history. See? So the way that they're using words, if you look up weasel words, go to Google weasel words. They say things in a way that it flies over your head. But they know what they mean, but you didn't know what they meant. Like they're talking about population decline. You would think that affects the African Americans and the Latinos. It doesn't. It's only affecting this group, the European population. And it's worldwide. Go Google European extinction. I want you to Google their propaganda terms. White genocide. I want you to look at the replacement theory. And you're going to see that it's talking about this, but they're using weasel words because they don't want certain groups of people to know this. This, what I'm doing right now, is called woke. Our political parties over in this country, United States, the white supremacist party, are so against people having knowledge that they've changed the word, oh, they know too much, to their woke. And they're calling it wokeism. No, it's a wokeist. And we're wokest. The wokest. And ist means that it's a perfectionist. And ism is a disease. So it's not wokeism, it's wokeist. A perfectionist and race discrimination is a racist. You're a professional at being a racist. The other term is racism, the disease. The ism is the disease. The ist is the perfectionist. Have mastered it. The ism is the disease. So wokeism is not a disease. Woke is not a disease. Racism is a disease. You can't say wokeism. You can say wokest, meaning the more awake. They're more alert. They're more intelligent. Such as now, I would say I'm more intelligent in this particular topic because I'm bringing it to you and I'm showing this to you that Europe is dying. This is the decline of Europe. Where you have the decline of Europe, the blood bank, the mother nest, the nest egg that woman factors, that the woman having children that leaves Europe and become white. Well, white, if you were white, you would be dead. If I was black, I would be dead. Both of those are two states of pigmentations that don't exist, that really don't exist. There's a brown and a darker brown, and then there's a pale and there's a lighter pale, but through all of this are these blue and red blood vessels, organs in your body. All of those are the same pigmentation at best most of the way. The same body organs. So by design, we are all Homo sapiens. But even that, we had to ascend to that. And that was through admixtures because we probably wouldn't see any Europeans the way they are today with the lighter skin if not for the albinos. it was one of the consciousness moves for the Africans that the albino skin and eyes could not tolerate the sun rays that's closer to the equator. So they moved them farther out above that 40 degrees parallel circle, at closer to the 45th parallel circle. There were people coming into Africa that were Africans themselves. A lot of them were albinos, and they would come and take those children away, and their parents would let them take them to go raise them in a lighter hemisphere, a cooler hemisphere. But according to, and it's still true, it is that African people will kill albinos because it's some type of sick racism disease that embodies those types of thinking, to show you that man and mankind ain't shit because they're dark on the inside. And then they use religion. Well, my God, why didn't your God stop this? Why didn't your God actually give you this type of wisdom to be able to assimilate these things? Because when your focus is on greed and you're so territorial, oh, well, my ancestors took this country. This is my country. No, the fuck it's not. You left your country. Your ancestors, they left your country, and look what's happening to it. They left your continent. You have a continent. Europe is a continent with several different countries situated there. You left. Look what's happening. Because you know why this is happening? Because you're not claiming your mother blood. You want it to be white, and you erased years and years and years and years and years of maternal records. You don't have the record. It's very few records, and that only record we could go to, it's on Wikipedia. When you Google German American, French American, Norwegian American, Italian American, a good one is to look at Iceland American. Look at those little small countries.
Well,
Finland
as we
American.
could see, the
There's a
number
few of
is
them here.
declining.
Guess what? They're adding in all those macrophage of all, typing it all into one big number under white to get them to a 63% under.
To become an American, which really meant
That's such a hard leap for white people to make. Is like, it isn't something that I personally did, but it's something I personally have to work against.
It ain't just a matter of who I am as a person or what I think or feel about other people.
I think there's a hierarchy in our country that's based very clearly on skin color and on people's perceptions of what race you're in. And white are at the top and black are at the bottom, and Asian and Native American and people of sort of light brown hue are in the middle, and Latinos are down, and then blacks are at the bottom.
Racism is not simply about how we get along on an individual level, but it has to do with who has institutional and social power.
White people have the political and social power in our society, and that is a given. And if you look at if you pick apart social and political situations, you can see that very clearly. I think it's quite obvious.
Whites get privilege and experience the advantage of being in a system that thinks white is better than folk of color, and so there's all this unearned advantage that's going on all the time.
So particularly in a society like the United States, it's hard to confront racism unless you understand how, if you're racialized as white, you benefit from racism.
Just because I am white and have these privileges, I participate in a racist system. And that doesn't make, that it's not my fault, I can't help it, I'm born to it. And, and that's what being white means.
But I do think and assume that white privilege is, in fact, the kind of racism that you can't avoid.
All I gotta do is sit down and close my eyes, and things are gonna just move forward and sort of in white interests. And there's a way in which I'm complicit. I collude. I don't say anything. I don't do anything to stop it or challenge it. And in that way, I really do think that's how racism works, and that's a way in which I'm racist. And the difference now is that I don't try and prove to anyone else or even to myself.
Over 90% of cyber attacks start with
this release. The title of the podcast I took from an article in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch talking about that particular region, which has really been essentially a stagnant region for a long time. A local analyst there said that their region had entered a demographic winter. And that is basically the case for the United States as a whole. Last year was not a good year for population growth in the United States. In fact, it was the lowest year of population growth ever recorded. Now, some of this is definitely due to people dying from COVID. If you don't think people died from COVID, a look at these population numbers will tell you that they did, but it's not just that. But first, let me just read a few things that give you a bit of a picture of what went on in America last year. I mentioned that it was the slowest year of growth on record in the United States. 3/4 of all counties in the United States had what is called natural decrease. So population growth comes from two forms. Natural increase, which is more people being born than dying, births minus deaths, natural increase, and migration. People moving in, people moving out. And migration can be international, could be immigrants coming into the country, or it could be domestic. It could be people leaving California and moving to Texas. Again, we call the component of population growth natural increase because typically there are more births than deaths. But we reached the point last year where in 3/4 of the counties in the United States, there were more deaths than births, more people dying than being born. This is what natural decrease is. We also saw big population losses in a lot.
Is without precedent in world history. Solutions. Yeah. I think we find ourselves at a crossroads. There's one way to turn this around, maybe. I'd call the Swedish model. There's not much you can say for the Swedish model that's encouraging.
If you've got a country or a region of the world that is losing population, that's devastating. I mean, that would say that that region would be in a depression, we'd call it in economics.
Experience in talking to people about this is that they simply don't understand what's about to happen.
There's not much quibble. There's not much controversy among people in the know.
have entered into a new phase of modern history. One that we desperately need to understand.
There's been a great decline in maybe 70 countries now that are below replacement fertility.
Replacement fertility is the number of childbirths per woman that is required to replace the existing population.
We're going into a new era.
Why is this aging, and why is this demographic winter occurring?
It's happening in rich countries, it's happening in poor countries, it's happening in Catholic countries, Islamic countries, and that is everywhere. People are having fewer and fewer children.
When fewer children are born, there are proportionately more elderly. This is called an aging population.
The world for the last 200 years has been population increases pretty much in all countries. So that's the challenge, to try to first understand why it's happening and then some consequences.
The reason the world has experienced a population explosion over the past century is not because human beings suddenly started breeding like rabbits. It's because they finally stopped dying like flies. What's really driven up human numbers has been a health explosion.
The population of children in the world has already declined, and yet world population will...
There's been a health explosion, especially here in the United States with the Affordable Care Act. And this is why the Republicans want to destroy that program. This is the reason why the Republicans wanted to ban abortions. This is what you need to understand. This is why you need to stop calling yourself black and white. Those are social constructs. I've shown you that.
Probably grow by another 1.7, 1.8 billion. It's a paradoxical reality until you do the simple arithmetic to see what's happening to the population of different age groups.
Certain population reduction in at least some countries, and in many countries without immigration, enters us into unknown terrain where there are potentially very significant negative consequences.
Some replacement fertility a generation and more ago means that the working age population, aged 15 to 64, is going to be slowing and then peaking and then declining more or less indefinitely as far as the demographer's eye can see.
In previous eras in which we had manpower shortages, we resorted to things like slavery and indentured servitude. And gradually, as the world population took off, beginning in the 18th century, we freed more and more categories of people from slavery, from debt peonage.
Most people think, because they've seen it all their life, real estate only goes up. They're not making more of it. Population's growing, and real estate doesn't always go up. It was down a lot of the early 1900s, and particularly in the 1930s in that depression.
Northern Italy and parts of Spain, with fertility rates below 1. Homes in abandoned villages all around Europe.
First, there's few births. Fertility rate is very low. It's 1.38 in Europe, whereas the rate needed for survival is 2.1.
While Western Europe is experiencing low fertility, parts of Eastern Europe are already experiencing population decline.
From 1989, for example, to 2002, the population has decreased by 13%.
The United States will face severe problems even before
under whiteness. That's how how the macrophage works. And then they sit there and they won't go against it. Well, when you're woke and you know this, you can just vote for Donald Trump. Okay? Right now they became stool pigeons. That any type of shit that he shats out, he can shat on it and the pigeons will stand in the shit. Stool pigeons standing in the shit pot with Donald Trump. All because of this. They don't want to tell you why. Talking about civil wars. A civil war. Why? Because of this. Because this is happening in the United States, Canada, all over Europe, South Africa, where any of the Euro populations are situated. It's happening there too. You will not replace us. Jews will not replace us. White genocide. The replacement theory. All embody this right here. What you're seeing right here. So I wanted you to see this. And I may sound like I'm angry. Well, I am angry with you guys. I'm angry at that you would be so to the point that you would fall for the propaganda. That you would fall for that propaganda. And that you're living under that guise right now of what you're calling your forefathers. I would tell you in this day and time that in order for you to say that this country is yours based on your forefathers, that you would need a DNA test to prove that you are part of those people that come here first. Because from my educational level, mass migration began 1872, 1870-ish, after the 14th Amendment was put into place, into law. And that they were going to umbrella this under this white fake population. Mass migration was up, and people coming from certain parts of Europe. And when other parts, people arrived here from Europe, they were pointed fingers at, discriminated against, not only because of their color to their skin, but their religions, the part of the country they had come from. So they've done this to each other too. Until they could figure out if we all get together and say we're white, we can dominate this country. If we could just all agree to come and vote everybody out, we could turn this into ours. And that's the crooked, wicked system right there. What they didn't expect was diversity. They hate it. They hated that. They didn't like it when what they so-called the blacks and whites were socializing. When the Europeans and the Africans were socializing, they didn't like it. You were called names like Inger lover, or Eager, E-I-G-G-E-R, European, N-I-G-G-E-R, black. Oh, you couldn't love each other because they were so against that. Same thing with religion. There's 3 Abrahamic religions. All of them have an Abraham, meaning that Abraham is really, that common name. What isn't common that is based on is theology. They all have Jesus in their book. The Jewish deny the house of Judah. They're not Jewish. That's Judah is not a people. Judah didn't bring forth the life to the Jews.
We also saw only 10 counties accounted for 80% of all the population growth in the entire United States last year. I mean, that's hyper concentration. So what were those counties?
World population will probably grow by another 1.7, 1.8 billion. It's a paradoxical reality until you do the simple arithmetic to see what's happening to the population of different age groups.
Certain population reduction in at least some countries, and in many countries without immigration, enters us into unknown terrain where there are potentially very significant negative consequences.
Some replacement fertility a generation and more ago means that the working age population, aged 15 to 64, is going to be slowing and then peaking and then declining more or less indefinitely as far as the demographer's eye can see.
In previous eras in which we had manpower shortages, we resorted to things like slavery and indentured servitude. And gradually, as the world population took off, beginning in the 18th century, we freed more and more categories of people from slavery, from debt peonage.
Most people think, because they've seen it all their life, real estate only goes up. They're not making more of it. Population's growing, and real estate doesn't always go up. It was down a lot of the early 1900s, and particularly in the 1930s in that depression.
Northern Italy and parts of Spain, with fertility rates below 1. Homes in abandoned villages all around Europe.
First, there's few births. Fertility rate is very low. It's 1.38 in Europe, whereas the rate needed for survival is 2.1.
While Western Europe is experiencing low fertility, parts of Eastern Europe are already experiencing population decline.
From behavior changed. The world changed in ways that affected the choices people made about sex and marriage and childbearing and work.
And most notably, I believe, the family changed.
For multiple reasons, social scientists believe that the sexual revolution had both direct and indirect effects on fertility decline.
The one thing that's least discussed in our nation is the rising rate of cohabitation, non-marital cohabitation. Cohabiting couples tend to have fewer children than married couples, and it also pushes the age of marriage up and up. And one of the biggest reasons for the low fertility is people have children too late.
There's some research that suggests that the change to no-fault divorce led to an increase in the divorce rate of something like 20%. The divorce revolution has really meant that neither men nor women can count on their spouse being there next year. The risk of divorce that a couple faces decreases the chances they'll have another child.
Excuses.
The elderly.
If you look at countries like Italy or Spain, where they're in the advanced throes of population aging, there's a theoretical demand for youth, but in the real world, the youth unemployment rate's in double digits.
The aging trap is very serious for many reasons. One is because financially, countries, and we see it today in Europe, in Asia, it cannot be supported. The social services, especially in social market economies, this is especially acute.
The result is the economy doesn't produce jobs.
We are accustomed to financing retirement and health benefits for the elderly by taxes on the working population.
Right now, the baby boom generation
the vast number of people born from 1946 through 1964 are in the workforce. They're paying into the system, helping fund the benefits that are being provided to the people who are already retired. But over the upcoming years, we're going to see that set of people move into the retirement phase.
If these taxes go up because we have fewer people, we have to tax them each more, that's going to be a burden on the younger population, and they will adjust to that burden in a number of ways, partly maybe by investing less in their human capital, partly by maybe working less, and that will have further negative consequences.
Social Security is only one part of the problem that we confront on the fiscal front. Medicare and Medicaid are a much bigger problem.
You see what the Republicans is focusing on?
Their growth is absolutely staggering under current law.
Can we rethink our approach to retirement benefits, medical care of the elderly, and adjust it to the world we will be in, which will be a world of stationary or declining population?
The current generations, particularly those who are now retired and those who are approaching retirement, are not fulfilling their proper responsibilities towards future generations.
Japan was a great leading indicator for developed countries and Western countries because they were the first to age because they didn't have the baby boom after World War II. When the United States, North America, Canada included, lesser degree Australia, New Zealand, and most of Europe, slow. Now you're talking 60-70% of the world economy. Even though emerging countries are growing rapidly, we're still the majority of these Western countries. When we all slow, that is going to have a bigger impact on the world economy, and it's going to hit
when white supremacy all slows.
Emerging countries at first as well, because emerging countries, and China's totally typical, 35-36% of its economy is exports.
According to them, there's going to be a financial collapse, but that's not true.
We think when the United States and Europe go into this slowdown, particularly by 2010, due to demographics, that at first it's going to hit emerging countries and their stock markets are going to go down and their economy is going to slow. Now the difference is they will have the demographics to bounce back once they recover from that, whereas the United States and Europe will continue to slow, and countries like Europe and Russia slow almost forever.
Under whiteness. That's how the Jewish deny the house of Judah. They're not Jewish. That's Judah is not a people. Judah didn't bring forth the life to the Jews. Judah was a man, and they decided to turn their population into Judaism, which was a religion. So, and notice I said ism. They're absolutely Europeans that have been disowned because of their association. Okay. So, those are false representations, and they're so detached that they are not counted as part of the European population and don't want to be either. So that's not a choice of theirs, though. They definitely have European blood. They could call it Scardic or whatever. They come from this tribe and that tribe and this tribe, and that's not true. Alexa, resume. So that's not true either. They're absolutely Europeans. They're just more organized, older, and organizing and taking over things than the other groups of Europeans. When you ask the Jews, where did you get your language Hebrew from? And they will point you to the hieroglyphs Well, the hieroglyph is not the name of that particular rock. You know the saying that that the truth is written on stone? Well, that particular, what they're calling the hieroglyphs, is called the metgeneter. Metju means word, and neter means God. Those terms were used before all of these languages. So when the Jews say they got it from the hieroglyphs, they got it from the metgeneter, their knowledge, their language. What it is, it's a history on that too. The Jews are European, that's all I'm going to say. But they go back in time, they do. Okay. And I actually appreciate the ones that are good lawyers. I do. Okay. So, that's just another social construct as well. Religion is used as a social construct also to brainwash people to dedicate their lives to a religious doctrine that most people can't live under those doctrines. People that live a very simple life may be able to ascertain some of those things in their way of life, but it doesn't fit the modern world to sit back and, you know, be burning fire, making a fire when you have a automatic pushed air heater or air conditioner. You know, it just doesn't make sense to sit there in the heat when you can turn on the air.
And the difference now is that I don't decisions around policy, you know, procedures, just all kinds of things. So at that level, I can use my influence.
What has been a challenge for me, or where my greatest challenges have been, is on how I can personally use the positions that I'm in to help to change the institutions in ways that make it possible for them to really be alive with communities of color and accountable to communities of color, and where people who come to work in those institutions can begin to come into them without feeling like they have to code switch, or without feeling like they have to put on another persona in order to survive.
There's this whole world out there that I had no idea about. And as far as I can see, people of color, the ones that I have been close to, and the communities that I've been around, have a lot more figured out about how to be human beings than white people do. I think because we're cast as oppressors, we've had to get rid of a lot of pieces of ourselves that are human, and it's deadened us to a lot. I mean, it's deadened our sympathies and our empathies and our heart to other people.
I think that not knowing that you come into this world with all this privilege makes us, you know, doesn't make us good people, in the sense that it doesn't make us, I take that back, doesn't make us the people we could be. It takes away from who we really are as true human beings when we start applying when you start benefiting from something that you didn't earn and you don't acknowledge and you don't do something about.
If you're going along with the status quo and you're not doing something to make change, you're part of the problem. And I think a lot of white people don't want to have that discussion. When we pretend that our school systems are okay and that the criminal justice system is okay and media depictions are okay, and we just go along with it, we are part of the problem.
If I do nothing in this world, because it is set up for me and mine, and because the systems operate for my benefit, then I am perpetuating that system. I am letting it go on. And I am benefiting every day from it.